Hi, Felicity Wilcox.
Hi, Claire.
Thanks for joining me today to talk about your piece on Ensemble Offspring's brand new Songbirds ABC Classic release, which came out last week. Your piece was written quite a few years ago now for Jason Noble, and it's called People of This Place. But before we talk about that piece, I actually wanted to start by asking you how it was that you got into composition and what your sort of background is as a composer.
Oh gosh, I always just played piano and made things up as a kid. And then I thought I wanted to go into composition. And I started studying at Sydney Uni when I was about 20 and didn't really like the formal study. And then I moved into screen composition because my mother, who's a filmmaker, offered me work on a documentary she was doing, and then from there I moved into lots of other work, which I did for 20 years. So I was mainly working in screen composition professionally, and then art music called, and I started formal study then after 15 years as a professional screen composer. And I studied at the Con with people like Mary Finster and Nigel Butterley and Trevor Pearce and Damien Ricketson, and then I started getting commissions in the art music world. So that's sort of how I moved in.
What would you say, what's the difference then between sort of writing for film and then writing what you describe as art music, which I guess is more kind of like chamber music or music for specific instrumentalists or musicians?
Yeah, I mean, there's overlap, but there's a world of difference really in terms of how you conceive the piece, the freedom you have. Like with art music, you can just do your thing. And when you're commissioned to write for a film, you're really in a team and you really have to realize the director's vision, and that's great. And I still do that a bit, but it was my main thing, and I needed to do other things. I needed to work in a freer space. And the main difference really is that with screen music, you tend to work from an electronic base all the time. So you're always working with software and you're limited by that software. Whereas with art music, you get to sit down with a blank sheet of manuscript paper and dream up sounds. And then write them for musicians like yourself, like for amazing people who can turn those ideas on paper into sound. And that is the exciting part for me, where it doesn't stop with me. Do you know what I mean? Like I'll have the idea and then I'll hand it over. And I think that's why I'm quite a collaborative composer, because I got used to working in the studio context with, electronic beds that I might have laid down, and then I'd invite musicians to come in and play, and we'd work up the idea together. And I have enormous respect for what musicians do and what musicians bring in terms of knowing their instrument and being able to bring that level of virtuosity and understanding to my pieces, which is what Jason did on this particular piece.
Well, before we talk about that particular collaborative process, I wanted to ask you, I've always wanted to ask how, when I email you, your name comes up as Felicity Fox. What is that? Was that your movie composer name?
A good idea in about 1987, to sort of make an artist's name and stick with it. And that was my work. I did all my screen composing work as Felicity Fox, really.
Wow.
And then when I started studying art music, it was Michael Smetana actually who said to me, no, you've got to use your name, your real name. You've got to use your real name for this work. And I think for me, it's sort of the demarcation between the commercial work that I did for other people, sort of as a hired hand. There was a lot of my voice in that work, but it was still always that, for another person. And the art music is my work, so it's my name. Plus, I think, I was only 35 when I moved into art. It was sort of like a maturing process for me. And I think knowing who I am came with that transition into art music that came with me using my own name. So it was kind of like a maturation thing as well.
Yeah, cool.
But I did some good work as Felicity Fox.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's cleared it all up for me. So when you wrote People of This Place for Jason, which was a couple of years ago now, and he's actually played that piece a lot at various Ensemble Offspring concerts and around the place, around the world. And I know that you worked very collaboratively in the development of that piece, which is much easier, of course, to do with a solo piece than a chamber music piece. But can you just tell us quickly about the process with working with Jason?
So I actually had the idea for People of This Place back in 2006 or something, when I was still an undergrad at Con, and I did a workshop with Harry Spane, the amazing Dutch-based clarinettist, and just thought, oh my God, this instrument's incredible. And I was sitting in the botanical gardens on a break, I think, that day, and I just thought, there's so much in our land and in our history that we don't speak about. It's really coming into a focus now, isn't it, with the current, movement. And I just wanted to write. I was also at the same time working with an Indigenous filmmaker, Darlene Johnson. I worked with her on about 3 films over the course of sort of, 5 or 6 years. And she taught me how to think about sound from an Indigenous, not that I'm Indigenous, but she lent me her perspective, which was to try and make sound that isn't necessarily localized in our Western musical language. And so as someone who's trained in that and who's practiced in that, to sort of put all that stuff aside and start to seek other kinds of sounds and other kinds of sonic identities through music was something I wanted to pursue. And so in consultation with Darlene on my film work, I started to develop an approach. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if I applied that to a concert work? And wouldn't it be interesting if I applied it to a work for bass clarinet, which has this amazing range, which can sound like a didge because it's a long instrument that's run by the breath. So it's got all that capacity for multiphonics and overlaps with the sound of the didge. But that said, it's its own instrument, and it's got Western legacy as well. So I thought it's an interesting instrument to explore this with. Plus, we can also do, really sort of micro sounds and key clicks and the sort of breath sounds and the sounds of nature I can evoke. And it was a combination of my kind of deep thinking about the Aboriginal land that we live on and how we tend to erase that history. And I feel very connected to that, to the land that I've grown up on. But I don't want to just express my connection to that through a white lens. I want to, even though I am non-Indigenous, I want to be inclusive in the kinds of ways that I express my own relationship with country. I know I'll never have a relationship with country that approaches an Aboriginal relationship with country, and I'm not pretending to do that. And to do that respectfully, I consulted with a UTS academic who's a Darawal man, an Indigenous man, Gawain Bodkin Andrews, about how, as a non-Indigenous person, I can approach that topic respectfully. And he listened to the work, and we had some great conversations around the work and how to deal respectfully with this subject. And so it's very important when the work's performed that there is an acknowledgement of country by the performer. That was the advice that I was given. And also in those conversations, it came up that the original title, which was Yurubirong, which means people of this place in Gadigal, should not be used. It should be the English title. And that's just out of respect for Indigenous language. And not,
because it was called
not taking any risks with that.
Yeah, for several years. And I have to say, through our work with Nara Barria and the Indigenous composers there and Christopher Sainsbury, and really only in the last 3 years have we really started to learn properly, like all those things that you're talking about. And I really respect your decision to change the title through that process. And I think for all of us, actually, it is just being flexible enough to admit, maybe we didn't know, but we respect, so we are very open to change and to learn and to show all those things. And I think that is actually part of the whole process, isn't it?
I agree. It's such a journey. And actually that, was solidified for me when I attended a forum at my university, UTS, led by Wesley Enoch. Jonathan Jones was there, various, Indigenous high-profile arts practitioners. They were talking about making art on Gadigal country, and none of the panel were Gadigal. They were all Indigenous, all highly respected, but none of them were Gadigal. And even Wesley was saying, he's from North Stradbroke Island, he was saying, as the curator, as the AD of Sydney Festival, he gets it wrong. He's an Indigenous man, and he comes with the best of intentions and with all respect, but he's not a Gadigal person. And he said, but I would rather try and falter and learn than not engage in dialogue with Indigenous culture. And I guess that's how I feel. The minute it was suggested to me not to use a Gadigal word, I revoked that. It's not, it's not something I'm interested in.
I love Wesley and the way he speaks about things just so honestly and openly. And I can imagine him saying that because, he is, sees himself as equal with everyone else as well. And I think people like Wesley and people like Christopher Sainsbury have really shown me that you are much better off to ask and to make mistakes and to put yourself out there, because there is no way that you can learn unless you do that.
No. And I think if we're going to broach this topic of kind of dealing with our colonial legacy and including all kinds of voices, we're probably going to get it wrong, and we're probably going to all be learning as we go. But to not do it also feels really wrong.
Yeah.
And Gawain, when Gawain and I were meeting, he thanked me for doing the, for pursuing this direction. And I know that I have, a respect and approval through him, and his research is very groundbreaking in this sort of space. But I think we just follow our instincts. And the people that the Indigenous people that I've connected with about this work, so Darlene, Gawain, Jonathan Jones, and we all spoke about this work, have led me to feel that the work's valuable and it's got a story to tell. So I'm proud of it. I mean, Jason has been an amazing force in the work. So I took the original sketches I made in 2006 with Harry Sparney, and they were kind of parked for about 10 years. And then I took them to Jason, and I just said, this is the work, these are the ideas, this work has been on ice. And sometimes that happens with your composing. Like I've got works that have been sitting and they're just waiting for their time to hatch. And when I worked with you guys in 2015 on Uncovered Ground, I really felt a connection with Jason. And I said at the end of that process, let's do something with this piece I've got on the back burner. So I took the concept, I took some of the ideas, I took some of the melodic motives, some of the ideas for extended techniques. They were already sort of baked, but then there was a lot that was really open and it needed his professional perspective. And so together we kind of pieced bits together that were working. He gave me really, really great feedback on what techniques worked and how they worked, and played lots of ideas and suggested ideas. I would then go off and consolidate that and sketch more and then go back to him. I think we met 3 or 4 times through the process, so he was really generous with his time. And the work that has evolved is actually, I mean, not only has Jason played it, and Jason and I chatted about this recently after your Melbourne Digital Recital concert, that he thinks that's about the 20th time he's played it.
Yeah, wow.
But Ross Dunlop's played it a lot as well and toured it to the UK. It was recently picked up by a Philadelphia musician, Paul Demers, who's the bass clarinettist with the Philadelphia Orchestra. He played it at a concert by the Philadelphia Orchestra, but also New Music Network. And they're in Philadelphia, and they've got people like George Crumb on their board. So they kind of do what you guys do, but over in Philadelphia. They sound amazing. They picked it up for a musical ecologies program that had works of this theme. So it seems to appeal to bass clarinetists because of the way it plugs into the versatility of that instrument, and is a real expose for that instrument and its range and everything it can do. And, you know, I have, you know, Jason to thank for that, because he really, I mean, we worked together, but he really just sealed the deal in terms of making it a really strong piece for bass clarinet. Yeah, that collaborative approach. Yeah.
And people can listen to it on our new Songbirds CD as well, which just got released about a week ago. And yeah, we're so excited about that. So you can stream it on all the different platforms and enjoy People of This Place by Felicity Wilcox. Thank you so much for chatting to me today, Felicity.
That was great. Thanks, Claire.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.